Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people just like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. Today's guest is Dr. Karin Dina, and she is going to be giving a wonderful presentation, and I know you're going to really enjoy it. But first, let me welcome her to the show, and she'll tell you a little bit about who she is and what she does. Welcome, Dr. Karin Dina.
Thank you very much, Chef AJ. It's wonderful to be here with you today.
Well, I can't wait to see your presentation because I know that one of the things that you do, and this is how we actually met, is you and your husband, Dr. Rick Dina, who actually was a previous wonderful guest on the show, you host a summit, a Raw Food Mastery Summit, and you are so gracious, you're going to offer it to the viewers again for free if they missed it.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, Dr. Rick and I were talking about this last night, and we thought it would be really fun if your viewers wanted to come and check out a replay of the Raw Food Mastery Summit. We're going to be getting it set up probably either today or tomorrow, so it'll be ready by either tomorrow or Wednesday. So if you go to rawfoodmasterysummit.com and sign up there for the replay, then within the next couple of days, we'll send you an email so you can go and access those interviews. And you can see on the page all of the different variety of speakers that we have. So people in the raw food community and a lot of the plant-based doctors that you've interviewed.
Right. I really enjoyed it. You know, I remember, I think one of my favorite interviews was a previous guest on the show. You had Dr. Milton Mills, and he gave a fabulous interview on your summit.
Yeah, he was wonderful. We were so happy that we got him this year. We've been wanting to get him for the last couple of years. And he came on and he talked about prebiotics, which is actually the way that I first learned about prebiotics was through Dr. Mills many years ago. So he gave a fantastic interview. And we have lots of other ones that are really good too, including yours. Yours is really awesome too. So.
It was a wonderful summit. So I hope you guys will go to rawfoodmasterysummit.com and check it out. What have you got to lose? So who are you, Dr. Karin Dina? I don't know if all my viewers are familiar with you. So what is your story of your plant-based journey?
You know, my plant-based journey started about 30 years ago. I sort of found plant-based nutrition at a time when I was experiencing a lot of fatigue, and I was in college at the time and I was sleeping about 10 to 12, sometimes even more hours per night. And I would wake up the next day feeling like I needed more sleep, like I hadn't really gotten refreshing sleep. And so kind of the short story is that I saw 3 medical professionals and they did a whole bunch of tests. And after all these tests, they finally had a diagnosis, which was fatigue of unknown origin. So basically what they told me what I didn't have, but they couldn't really figure out what was going on with me. So they didn't really have all that much to offer, unfortunately. But one thing that I asked them all was, do you think that there's a connection between my college lifestyle and diet? And they all pretty much said no. So I pretty much had to figure out things on my own from there. And so I started reading and researching. And one day a friend of mine actually gave me a book on plant-based diets. It's called Diet for a New America. And so I read this book and started to learn about the diet and health connection and the environment and the animals, and everything just made so much sense. It was just such an amazing book. And so I actually transitioned to a plant-based diet, and within a short period of time, my fatigue started to improve. And instead of sleeping 10 to 12 hours per night, I went down to 8 hours per night, and I woke up the next day feeling really good, or should I say I woke up every day feeling good from that point forward. But what was really interesting was that by chance, I actually learned about a raw food diet. And when I started to implement that, that's when my energy really changed quite a bit. And I went from sleeping 8 hours per night down to 6 hours per night. And I would wake up in the morning just feeling really the best I ever had in my life. It was just amazing. My fatigue went away. A lot of the different symptoms that I'd had for years went away. I'd had this challenge ever since I was a kid where I would get sick every single winter and pretty much be sick from the holidays through until April or May of that year. And I'd always have a really blocked nose and lots of congestion, and that totally vanished on raw food. So more energy, a lot of symptoms went away. I started to look healthier. I slept better. I actually started to enjoy exercising, and my digestion really improved significantly as well. So for me, raw food really made a difference for me. So that aspect of plant-based nutrition really was a total game changer.
You know, it's funny that the doctors diagnosed you with fatigue of unknown origin. That sounds like, well, you're tired, but we don't know why.
Exactly. Exactly. And the thing is, I don't blame them. It's like they, there are just limitations. And I was just so happy that I was able to find something that really worked for me. And I was just so inspired by this whole experience, but it left me with a lot of questions. I was like, gosh, why don't more people know about this? This is such a wonderful thing. A plant-based diet can make such a huge difference for people. So I actually went back to school and I got an undergraduate degree in biology. And then I went on to education, graduate education at Bastyr University for naturopathic medicine. And then I studied chiropractic after that. So I was able to really understand how the body heals itself on a much deeper level than what I had learned just from reading raw food books and plant-based diet books. And so after this, I was just so inspired to bring this message to people who might need it like I did. And so my husband and I, Dr. Rick Dina, created our series of classes called The Science of Raw Food Nutrition that we taught in person for 10 years here in Northern California. And then starting 4.5 years ago, we pivoted and went online to create the Mastering Raw Food Nutrition and Educator course. We're going into our 5th year of teaching that. And we're really happy that we can share science-based raw food and plant-based nutrition information for people to help them have life-changing experiences and experience their best health. So yeah, we're whole food plant-based with a focus on fruits and vegetables. And I would say for myself, I'm pretty close to 100% raw because I need to do that for my fatigue. If I stay closer to 100% raw, I feel fantastic. When I start to add more cooked foods in, I start to maybe not feel quite as good, but not 100% completely.
So we have a wonderful question from Gasia, and excuse me for interrupting. I hate when the feed goes so quickly. I don't want to miss this great question because I think you're going to address this. But the question is, do you think that whole food plant-based diet is not enough for health? Why raw? And I'm here to learn because I feel that even the diet that I promote, which is not raw 100%, but I eliminate sugar, oil, and salt, people think like I'm crazy, right? And then if I now tell them, okay, but now you can't cook anything. Do you understand the question? I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm just saying the stuff that I hear every day, I'm already a freak. And if I then said, now no more cooking, I just think people would just like lock me up.
Well, you know what? The way that we look at this, and this is exactly the point that I was going to make next, is that it's a continuum. And what's really important is to find what works best for you. And where you are on that continuum of whole food, plant-based, mostly cooked, up to raw, really depends on your situation and what's going to work for you personally. What I was actually going to say was that most of our students are actually not 100% raw, and they don't necessarily want to be. And so they come to us because they want our focus on science and our inclusive nature. They like the fact that we don't tell people that they have to be 100%. And this is actually one of the trends that I've noticed as of late, which is the title of my talk. It's like, a trend in the raw food plant-based community that I've seen in the past 10 years is that people are kind of going in the direction of wanting to eat a lot of raw food, but not necessarily 100%. And if that's 50% and that gives you the best health results, that's fantastic. If it's 70%, that's awesome. If it's closer to 100%, that's awesome too. We want to support people in their ability to find what works best for them. For sure. That's a really good question.
But I agree that whatever anybody's diet, whether it's vegan or not, people don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. They just don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And the point is to really get people interested in adding more fruits and vegetables into their diet. And as far as they want to take it, that's entirely up to them. And in fact, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today with you was how to cook, or what cooking methods are going to help with the retention of certain nutrients that can be destroyed or affected by cooking. So
that sounds great. I would love that, because people ask that question to me all the time, like, was it better to steam, or what's wrong with air frying or grilling or roasting? So this would be really wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're absolutely welcome. So one of the vegetables that people talk about insofar as whether or not they should cook it, because sometimes it can be a little bit hard to digest when it's raw, is broccoli. And you've probably heard something similar too, because people will oftentimes ask me, well, geez, what should I do? I love broccoli, but it's really hard to eat it raw. So if I want to maintain the vitamin content of it, how do I do that? So uh, just before we get started, I have some slides to show you all about some research that I've been talking about for years that's really helpful to understand. But before we go into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about certain nutrients that can be lost through cooking and why. So really the nutrients, or should I say the vitamins that tend to be more susceptible to loss by heat are what is called the water-soluble vitamins. And the water-soluble vitamins are vitamin C and the B vitamins. And whereas the fat-soluble vitamins are not as susceptible to damage by heat, and those would be vitamins A, D, E, K, and the carotenoids. So what research is indicating overall is that water-soluble vitamins tend to be more susceptible to damage by heat, likely because they're found in, for example, in plants, they're found in plant cells, areas of plant cells that are more watery and contain more water, whereas the fat-soluble vitamins are found in more fatty areas of plant cells, like the fatty cell membrane. And since fat is a great insulator, those vitamins tend to not be damaged as readily. So for the water-soluble vitamins I'd like to look at today, we're going to look at vitamin C and folate, which is known as vitamin B9. So let me bring up these slides right here. We'll see where we can go with this. Let's see, how does that look?
Perfect.
Excellent. So boiling versus steaming of broccoli florets. Let me see if I can advance the slide here. There we go. So in this study right here, this study actually looked at folate. And folate is also known as vitamin B9. Perhaps a lot of you have heard that before. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the folate content of broccoli florets with boiling and steaming at cooking times that people tend to use. In this study, what was found was that boiling of broccoli florets for 5 minutes resulted in 48% of the loss of folate, 56% lost after 10 minutes, and then 65% lost after 15 minutes. And then with steaming, there was no significant loss in folate after 15 minutes. Now, one thing I'd like to mention is that the research I'm talking about here is mirrored by other research in the scientific literature. This is what we tend to see overall. So that's really good news for steaming. And so this is one thing that we talk to our students about. It's like, okay, if you'd like to steam your broccoli florets, you're not going to lose a significant amount of folate because we know that folate is important. Now with vitamin C, we kind of see a similar trend with broccoli florets. With boiling for 5 minutes, we see 33% lost, and then with steaming, there's no significant loss after 5 minutes. So that's some really good news there. So if somebody wants to cook, that is one thing that they can certainly do, steaming as opposed to boiling. Now, when we get into the more intense cooking methods, such as baking, above the level of 248 degrees, then we start to see the formation of acrylamide, especially in foods that are higher in carbohydrate, like potatoes, for example. So if we want to stay away from the formation of so-called cooked food toxins or novel substances like that, then keeping our cooking temperature below 248 degrees Fahrenheit is best for that. So from what I understand, you like to steam?
I do. I do like to steam my vegetables, and I actually like to drink the broth. And there's actually a question from Betty Lynn: what if can you drink the water from the steamed vegetables?
You know, a lot of people have asked that. I've never actually done that before, but I do know a lot of people that do that. And what's really good about doing that is that if there is any loss of minerals. And minerals themselves are not affected by heat individually, but they can be lost through leaching. For example, if you cook or if you steam or boil, then there can be some mineral leaching into that boil water or into that steam water. If you do drink that, you'll be able to get those minerals that might have been lost that way.
Yeah. I do it just because I like a warm beverage and I don't drink coffee and it tastes good. And somebody's asking, what about frozen things like broccoli and cauliflower? Is that less favorable?
You know, I'm kind of on the fence about that. Some of the I would say the research is kind of mixed on that insofar as nutrient loss goes, or should I say specifically vitamin and phytonutrient loss. Um, some studies show that there is some loss from freezing, but you know what? I think I sort of see it that it's something that can help to get more fruits and vegetables into people's diets. And so I see it as a positive thing because people live in certain areas of the world where they might not be able to get fresh vegetables at certain times of the year, or at least good quality ones. And so I would say if frozen vegetables and fruits are what's available to you, then it's good to take advantage of that.
Great. Ken, who's a big fan of both you and Dr. Rick, says, is it okay to steam potatoes in an Instant Pot?
You know, that's a really good question. A lot of people have been asking about Instant Pots, and I would say it's perfectly fine if it's working for you. Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
we use a regular steamer. Do you use an Instant Pot, AJ? How does that
Well,
work?
I do use an Instant Pot, but I also use the steamer, but I use both. I'm afraid I'm almost embarrassed to say what I sometimes use now but I sometimes use the microwave steamer. That's probably not good, I'm guessing.
You know what's so interesting about microwaving? Most of the studies that I've seen done on microwaving shows that microwaving actually can help with the retention of certain vitamins, kind of similar to steaming. I'm actually interested in knowing what happens on a molecular level when there's microwaving going on, but there aren't a lot of studies that have been done on that yet. So that's kind of I would say on the back burner for now until we learn more about that. But yeah, as far as nutrient retention, apparently microwaving can be a good alternative. And I kind of say that with reservation because I'm looking forward to more research coming out about that in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about a little bit here is beta carotene, because you've probably heard about this beta carotene controversy. A lot of people come to me with this question, especially when I'm talking to people over the summer to have them to see if they're interested in joining our class. This is one thing that Dr. Rick and I do, is that during the summer, we talk to new potential students to see if the class is a good fit for them. And one of the big questions that I get from these people is, do I have to cook for beta carotene? Because I think there's a lot of videos and information out there on the internet saying that you need to cook foods to get enough beta carotene. And I think a lot of it stems from this one particular study that's called the Gießen study. And I don't know if you've heard of that one before. Some of the people that are probably out there watching have heard of it. It's a very well-known study, I would say. And it's called the Gießen study because it was conducted at the University of Gießen in Germany. It was published back in 2010, so it's been around for quite some time. And what's really interesting about the study is that one of the study groups was a group of raw food enthusiasts. And the researchers were really interested in a variety of different health parameters in these raw foodists. And so what they did was they studied a variety of different, like I said, health parameters. One of them was blood beta-carotene levels. And so they compared a group of raw food enthusiasts to a group of standard Western eaters, and then a group of omnivores who focused their diet more on whole foods like fruits and vegetables, but they cooked. So the researchers referred to that group as the wholesome nutrition group, and I'll refer to them a couple of times as we're talking here as that by that name, just so you guys can understand what's going on. So as far as the amount of beta carotene that was actually consumed by these folks, by these three particular groups, the raw food group, not surprisingly, had the highest intake of beta carotene. And for those of you who like numbers out there, the amount of beta carotene that these raw foodists were consuming was 14.7 milligrams. And just kind of keep that number in mind. I'll circle back to it in just a minute. So 14.7 milligrams of beta carotene were consumed by the raw foodists. The wholesome nutrition group, which was the group of omnivores that also ate some cooked fruits and vegetables, the amount of beta carotene that they were consuming per day was 9.3 milligrams. And then the standard Western group had an intake of 5.5 milligrams. So the raw foodists were definitely the highest. Now, what was the beta carotene status of these groups? You would think, because the raw foodists were consuming the most beta carotene, that they would have the highest blood levels. But that wasn't actually the case in this study. What was found was that the beta carotene levels of the raw foodists were 1.16 micromoles per liter. And that's what the researchers used. They reported micromoles per liter, so 1.16 micromoles. Now, for the wholesome nutrition group, which was the omnivore group that cooked their fruits and vegetables, they had 1.65 micromoles per liter of beta carotene. And then the standard Western diet group was the lowest at 1.07. So that was a big surprise. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people are out there saying that we need to cook for beta carotene, because from raw food, we might not get as much as we would if we cooked. Now, is that true? There's a lot of truth to that, but we need to take a closer look at this. If we look at this study, the raw foodist intake of beta carotene specifically, it's actually kind of on the low side if I compare that to how much is consumed by most raw foodists that I know. So when I looked at that when I looked at that 14.7 milligrams per day that the raw foodists were eating, I thought, wow, that seems a little bit low. I thought, I eat way more than that. So I actually went and looked at a variety of nutrient analyses that I have done on myself over the years. And I saw that the range of beta carotene that I usually consume is somewhere between 50 to 60 milligrams per day. And that's quite a bit higher than the 14.7 milligrams that these raw foodists were eating. So I was thinking, what gives with that? That seems a little bit odd. And so I looked a little bit closer at the raw foodists in the study, and I found that only 24% of them were even fully plant-based. In fact, 76% of them were omnivores. So a very different nutritional profile than the raw food enthusiasts that I know. And I thought, wow, it's hard to compare a study like this to raw plant-based eaters. So I was just really kind of astounded with that. Now, so I actually went out and I got my blood beta carotene levels checked. And for the reference range for the lab that I was using for the testing, the reference range was 3 to 91. And my level of beta carotene was 370. So pretty much off the charts. And then if I convert that into the units that were used in this study, my level was 6.9. So if we compare that to the raw foodists in this study at 1.16, I was quite a bit higher, 4 times higher actually than the highest group, which was the omnivores in this study. So what it comes down to here, actually, before I go on with that, I wanted to also mention that Dr. Rick and a friend of ours and a lot of our patients that we work with were actually higher than all of these groups as well. So what it comes down to is you don't necessarily have to cook for beta carotene if you're eating fruits and vegetables in quantity, like most raw foodists that I know. And so I just wanted to mention that. I wanted to sort of dispel this myth. It's kind of surprising that the researchers chose a group of raw foodists that had a diet that was very different than most of the raw foodists that are actually out there. So
I just want to mention that Kayla says she heard that cooking carrots actually increases their nutrient bioavailability. And I've heard that said about certain vegetables like the lutein in greens and the lycopene in tomatoes. Is that just a myth that when we hear people say that?
You know, Actually, there is some truth to that, that beta-carotene bioavailability can be improved from cooking. But the bottom line is that if you're eating a lot of raw fruits and vegetables, you don't necessarily have to cook because you're getting so much to begin with that you're going to be absorbing, even though it might be a smaller percentage of that beta-carotene, you're still going to absorb and experience the benefits of more than you would on a diet where you're not eating as many fruits and vegetables. So I would say it's a good idea for people to go out there and actually just look and see, like maybe do a nutrient analysis, go over to Chronometer or one of those online nutrient analysis softwares that's available, and just put in what you eat in a day and see what your beta carotene level is. And from other studies that I've looked at, if you're eating beta carotene from raw sources, you can absorb probably about 41% of that. And then if you're eating it from cooked sources, I think it's 65%. Let me just look and see if I have that information here. So just take a minute.
Sure.
I want to give you guys good information. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's 65% of the beta carotene tends to be absorbed from cooked foods versus 41% absorbed from raw foods. That was one particular study that did have a couple of design flaws. So those numbers might be a little bit different, but that's what you can pretty much count on. And really the best thing to know for sure what your beta carotene status is from whatever you're eating is to get a test and see where that is. And you can also get a test for vitamin A to see how well you're converting too, because that's another question that people have as well. How well do people convert beta carotene and the other carotenoids that have vitamin A activity into actual vitamin A, retinol?
So when you say get a test, is this something that you can just ask your doctor to order?
Generally, yeah. Most doctors can order this, at least from what I know. We order this for our patients all the time if they request it. So yeah, and you can also get the vitamin A test as well.
Interesting. We have a really great question from Peppermint. Is there any vegetable that should not be eaten raw? Are all vegetables virtually good for raw consumption?
You know, that really depends. There are some, yeah, wow. I know there are some that you can't eat raw, and it's really interesting because I don't really focus on those. I tend to focus on the ones that you can eat raw. I would say that it's a good idea to research anything that is not known as being good to eat raw, just to see if you know, if it can or can't. One of my classic examples is actually raw sprouted kidney beans, and I know that that's not a vegetable; it's a legume. But there are some legumes that would fall into this category that when you steam, or should I say, when you sprout them, they might form certain anti-nutrients. And with raw kidney beans, when you soak and sprout them, it forms this substance that's called phytohemagglutinin. And I know that's kind of a long word, but essentially what phytohemagglutinin does is it can cause digestive health challenges, and it's kind of named appropriately because phyto means plant and heme means it means blood or red blood cells, and then agglutinin means agglutination or clumping. So it can cause the clumping of red blood cells, but it usually doesn't get that far. Usually it causes so much digestive system distress that the body gets rid of it pretty quickly, you know, through.
One thing I can't imagine eating raw would be an artichoke.
Yeah. That's a good example of one that would be really tough to eat raw. Some people think that broccoli is tough to eat raw. Some people have said that they think that cauliflower is kind of tough to eat raw. What's really funny, though, is that my husband, Dr. Rick, eats pretty much a head of cauliflower almost every day, and he doesn't have any problem with digesting that. It's the same thing for like raw sprouted chickpeas. He can eat those very well raw, but other people have digestive challenges with those. And so I would say that if something is not agreeing with you digestion wise, then maybe steaming it is a better idea, or maybe leaving it out if there's the formation of anti-nutrients, like, for example, with the raw kidney beans that I just mentioned.
Nice, thank you. And
yeah, sure.
Stephen wanted to know, does using the Vitamix increase bioavailability?
You know, pureeing definitely does. There's been studies on pureeing that shows that bioavailability is increased with that. We don't have any studies on high-speed blenders yet that address that. And I was hoping that by this time, we'd actually have studies about that, but that would be a wonderful study for somebody to conduct to actually see how much more bioavailable foods can become and actually see some numbers for that.
This is interesting. Betty Lynn is saying, do you eat mushrooms raw? Because I do remember Dr. Furman saying you can't. I mean, he's really adamant about that.
You know, it really depends on the mushrooms. And I actually don't eat mushrooms, but I've heard those conversations as well. And I would say, look to the science. If Dr. Furman is showing some science that would indicate that there's a very good reason, a compelling reason to eat those mushrooms raw, then that's something to pay attention to. One of the things that's on my list to actually study for this fall is mushrooms. And people have been asking me this for years. And there are so many things that I want to look into. But since mushrooms aren't something that I normally eat, I haven't actually looked into that yet. But that is a fantastic question. So as far as, let's see, I think that I'm actually pretty good. There is one other kind of fun slide that I want to show you guys here. Let me see if I can bring it up. There we go. Here is a salad. And this is kind of a medium-sized salad. And I want to talk a little bit here about the folate and the vitamin C content of this. Because if you add a salad into your diet per day, even if it's a smaller one, you can get a good amount of folate and vitamin C in there if you're including a lot of leafy greens. Leafy greens are well known for being good sources of folate. Same thing with vitamin C. So in this salad right here, we've got 3 cups of dandelion greens. I love dandelion greens. I know some people don't like them, but I love them. We've got a 1/4 cup of basil and 3 cups of heirloom tomatoes. We've got 2 cups of carrots, 3 cups of cucumber, and 8 cups of romaine lettuce. So that's like a small to medium-sized head of romaine lettuce. And we've got 483 micrograms of folate. And if we compare that to the adult daily value, which is 400 micrograms, that is really significant. And then with vitamin C, we have 250 micrograms. And so if we compare that to the adult daily value, we have 75 to 90 milligrams, 75 for women, 90 for men. So as you can see, the folate and the vitamin C content of the salad's really good. And then for beta-carotene, we've got 36.5 milligrams. So that's pretty amazing. And if we consider how much of that we can get, 41% of that we can probably absorb, we're going to be getting a decent amount of beta-carotene from this salad. So
that's amazing. I chop my salads because I enjoy them more that way. That's okay to do, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly what I do. I love chopped salads.
Yeah.
And
Kathleen wants to know if you put a dressing on your salad.
Oh yeah, definitely. We like to put a variety of different dressings. One of our favorite ones contains chia seeds and walnuts and courgette, also known as zucchini, and then a little bit of lemon, and then sometimes some type of spice or herb in there, and a little bit of miso maybe. Or you can leave that out. Some people don't want to have salt in their diet, so you can take that out. And then if you want more of a salty flavor, you can add a little bit of celery in there, and that makes a really nice dressing. And then there's also tomato-based dressings that you can make with chia seeds and then with walnuts. We like to focus our nut consumption on the omega-3 rich nuts. So things like chia seeds and walnuts, those are some of the favorite nuts that we have. We don't go super high on the fat. People oftentimes ask us if we eat an 80-10-10 type of diet. We actually eat probably about 20% of our calories from fat. We've found that that has worked really well for us to be able to sustain a raw plant-based diet that's kind of on the higher end, 90 or so% raw for the past 30 years. So that has worked really, really well for us.
Do you find though, one of the things I teach, because I teach a lot of weight loss classes, is I focus on caloric density. And because raw food is what I call to the left of the red line, you have to eat more food.
Yes. Yes, you definitely have to. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges that people have when they first become interested in raw food. They think, oh my gosh, I have to eat way more food to feel satisfied and to get enough calories. So that can be a challenge at first. And this is one of the things that we talk to our students about is strategies that you can use to actually feel more satisfied and full on fewer calories. Kind of what you talk about with calorie density. And one way you can do that is by adding maybe a little bit of extra nuts and seeds in there so that you don't have to eat as much from fruit or carbohydrate sources. But it really depends. The mixture just really depends on what's working best for you. We encourage you guys to be really open-minded and to just find what works best. And if you see information out there that's conflicting, there's probably something to that. Try to look into what could be causing that conflict. Why is it that one person is saying one thing versus another? Looking to the scientific literature or talking to people that have been on this path for a long time, healthcare practitioners can help you to figure out what is the best mix for you.
Right. Someone's saying that chewing also increases bioavailability.
It sure does.
It's
Yes, it
really
sure
important
does.
to chew.
Awesome.
So this is from Ken, who's a big fan. He says, Dr. Graham says balsamic is poison, but I love it. What is your opinion?
We don't actually use vinegar, but I would say if it's working for you and if it's helping to get more whole
Right.
natural plant foods into your diet, that's fantastic. I don't see a problem with it in small amounts. I think that the challenge with it that I've noticed is that for a long time there was a trend of people actually drinking it, like taking like a third of a cup or a few tablespoons and actually drinking it. That I would be concerned about. But eating it on a salad, I don't see that as a problem. If you find that it's not working for you digestion wise, you don't feel your best, you can always shift out of that into another type of dressing. But yeah, I'd say having it from time to time, I think is perfectly fine. Do you use that?
I do, but I use so little because I really have learned that when I chop my salads finely, I literally need 2 tablespoons of it. And that's it, because the chopping kind of makes it, almost like a dressing.
Yeah, it spreads it around totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
So I
great
do
point.
use it, but I use it, I don't, I condiment responsibly. I'm not drinking it. I'm not using that much. And mainly because I'm also cheap and it's very expensive, but I find that it's
Yeah.
so flavorful, a little goes a long way. So yeah, I do use it. Here's a great question. Would you recommend a raw nutrition path to people with thyroid disease?
It really just depends on what type of thyroid disease we're talking about. Um, this is a really good question for, I would say, an individual healthcare practitioner so that they could really answer that for you. There's a big difference between, for example, Hashimoto's thyroiditis and other types of thyroid health challenges. So that's just something to be aware of. I know that in cabbage family foods, there are these substances, glucosinolates, which get converted into isothiocyanates when we chew or when we blend. Isothiocyanates have this reputation as blocking iodine uptake by the thyroid gland. And that can be a challenge for some people if they have a certain type of thyroid health challenge. But we need to sort of take it on a case-by-case basis. This isn't one of those situations where I would just make a blanket statement. If somebody has Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease, shifting to a more plant-based diet and eliminating the molecules, whatever is causing or leading to the immune system being activated, that can really help to resolve that situation.
Yeah. So there's a question, does raw food nutrition help if you're suffering from bloating?
Well, it depends on what the cause of the bloating is for sure. And one of the biggest things that we've seen, at least from our students in our clinical practice, is what's called intestinal dysbiosis, or I guess a better way to describe that is if somebody has microbiome health challenges. And so oftentimes if somebody adds some more foods into their diet that have what is called prebiotics, or certain types of fiber that probiotic bacteria really love to eat. And this is something that Dr. Milton Mills talked about on our summit. So if you go to rawfoodmasterysummit.com and sign up for our summit replay, you can listen to that wonderful interview where he talks about this, where when we add prebiotics to our diet, that we can actually encourage the growth of probiotics, which can help in turn with our digestion if that's what's going on.
Right. Ken wants to know what's the best source of iodine.
Wow. There's a lot of controversy about this. A lot of people like to use kelp and certain sea vegetables. We have to be careful though with kelp because it's super, super, super high in iodine, and we don't want to be overusing that. So I would say it's a good idea to take a close look as to what it is that you're using, if you're using kelp or if you're using some other sea vegetable, to see how much iodine's actually in there so that you're not overusing it. Now, when I use kelp, I just use a little sprinkle, just like a little shake, and then you get a little bit from that. There are tests that you can do to actually see where your iodine status is. And that's something that my husband, Dr. Rick, does do in addition to a variety of other tests. But you can get that test from probably most doctors out there.
Right. So some of the people may not know this, and maybe you don't know this, but I was diagnosed with pre-colon cancer when I was 43, and I went to the Optimum Health Institute, and I went 100% raw for close to 2 years. And I think it's amazing for healing. I was so cold the whole time.
A lot of people say that. A lot of people say that. So one of the best things that we can do for, I would say, not feeling cold on raw food is exercise. I've really noticed that myself. And I would say for me, I actually tend to run more on the warm end of the spectrum. Like, for example, here in my office today, it's pretty cool. It's in the 50s. Interestingly enough, I'm here in Northern California, and this, for some reason, my office is like the coldest in the house, the coldest room in the house. And sometimes I sit here like I've got kind of a light turtleneck on, and I am actually pretty warm.
That is so funny. It's way over 100 here. So what I did is instead of just changing my diet, I just changed my location. So it's always hot where I live now. So I'm very happy.
So that's awesome. I've told Rick before, I'm like, maybe we should move to Southern California. He's like, no, we don't want it. It's too hot down there. But it's I would say that there are spices that you can use to warm up. And the thing is, if you don't want to be 100% raw, you can add some steamed vegetables and other things into your diets, steamed starches, as Chef AJ does, as I do from time to time. And, it really just depends on what's going to work best for you. And this is kind of my overreaching theme when I just talk to people generally about raw food, because we like to be very inclusive. We want you to get the best results for you. That's really what it comes down to. It's not about being 100% anything. And after 30 years, I have to say that I have this point of view because I've seen so many different approaches work well for people. And I just want to honor everybody's path. And that's really what it comes down to. And then as far as like the fine tuning goes, that's kind of where our class can come in, which is called Mastering Raw Food Nutrition. And we teach people whole food plant-based nutrition as being the solid foundation behind a successful raw food diet approach or a raw food focused approach that you can thrive on for 30 years, as Dr. Rick and I have. So we talk about healthier ways that you can cook, as for example, as we just talked about earlier. We talk about how to find the mix that works best for you from what we understand from our own clinical experience, from the science and the research that we have looked into over the years, and from our own personal experience.
Do you ever miss a baked potato?
I haven't had a baked potato in a long time. I like to steam potatoes. Last winter, I made steamed potatoes a few times. And one thing that I did, this is so good. If you add a little bit of avocado and maybe a tiny little bit of some type of sea vegetable like dulse flakes or something like that. If you like, if you're somebody who adds a little bit of salt to your food, if you put a little bit of miso in there, it's delicious. It's really good. And then the same thing, I do the same thing with my Japanese sweet potatoes. For those of you who might not be familiar with them, they have kind of a purplish skin on them, and they're really light flesh on the inside, like white flesh. They're so good.
Oh my God, that's what I'm having for lunch. That's what I love them so much. I just can't imagine not having them anymore, not.
You don't have to. You don't have to go without them.
Yeah.
I'm pretty close to 100% raw, 90 to 95% or thereabouts. I eat cooked food socially too, although since the pandemic started, we haven't really gone out very much. So it's not an all or nothing type of thing. And
Right.
as far as steaming goes, you don't have to worry about a lot of nutrient loss. You don't have to worry so much about the potential for the formation of things like acrylamide that you tend to get above 248 degrees Fahrenheit. It's there's a lot of opportunity for finding what works best with some mixture of certain types of cooked foods in there, especially things like steamed vegetables.
Gina says that she loves her philosophy to honor everyone's path and what works for them. And what I love about everybody that works in plant-based world, we all agree, don't eat crap. I mean, that's we can say eat this, eat that, but everybody agrees we're not supposed to be eating crap, meaning processed food, and we're not supposed to be eating animal products. And I think if people even just did that much, their health would soar.
Completely. And that was my experience too, back 30 years ago when I started eating a whole food plant-based diet. I got tremendous health benefit. My fatigue really started to resolve. It made a huge difference for me. I think of raw food as being added benefit. And you can see that and feel it for yourself. It's something that's worth trying just for your own interest.
You know what was interesting is when I was raw, I almost didn't need sleep, and it was just it was crazy because I actually kind of like to sleep a little bit, but there's something about that diet that just you don't sleep. Not that you don't sleep well, you just don't seem to need as much sleep.
Yeah, I've noticed that myself, and I've noticed that my sleep quality is actually better too. Like I wake up feeling refreshed, and a lot of mornings I don't have to use a alarm clock. I just wake up spontaneously, and it's fantastic. It's just, it's made such a huge difference. And this is one of the reasons why we teach our class. We want to be able to have people know that it can be sustainable. It can work over the long term, and you can get tremendous health benefits depending on what it is you're trying to resolve. Certain dietarily related health challenges can respond to that. There are other things that might not be dietarily related that might be able to be improved too. So it really just depends on the person and what it is that they're trying to achieve.
Right. Before I ask you the next question, I need to thank Sherry for using the super chat feature. Some people like to make small donations to the show to thank us for these interviews, and she says she loves the guests. So thank you.
Oh,
I do too. Because, you know what? I wanted to ask you, are you familiar with either Dr. Susanna Holt or the Satiety Index? And the reason I'm asking is I know I love vegetables and I love fruit, but I don't feel as full when I don't eat starch. And is that something you just learn by eating larger volumes of fruits or vegetables? Or is it possible that for certain people, certain foods just have greater satiety?
I think that the latter. I think that certain things really help people feel more full. And I think that a lot of this is so interesting. Dr. Rick and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, that if we grow up on certain sort of denser foods, like for example, I grew up on a standard Western diet. And when I transitioned to a raw food diet, I didn't feel the way that I used to feel when I ate cooked stuff. And it was kind of unsettling at first. I was thinking, oh gosh, I really want to feel full. And by adding cooked food in, I got that satiety that I experienced before. But what's really interesting is that if somebody starts by eating, if they start their life eating mostly raw food, they might not notice that quite as much. And I actually don't notice this as much now that I've been on this raw food path for so long, that when I eat more fruits and vegetables, and if I add some nuts and seeds in, these nuts and seeds actually can increase my satiety, kind of similar to eating steamed potatoes or steamed Japanese yams, for example. It's kind of a similar type of feeling. So I think there are certain things that people can do and experiment with to see what's going to give them that feeling of satiety, so they're not constantly thinking like, oh, I need to eat something else, and if adding in some steamed foods or some other type of cooked food, a little bit of that, if that creates that satiety for them and helps to keep them on the path where they're enjoying a lot of fruits and vegetables, then that could be a really good solution.
One of the things I've always said is do the least restrictive diet you can do that will give you the results you want.
Yes, I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Cheryl wants to know if you eat 3 meals a day or do you tend to graze?
I'm a meal eater. And I think that this actually kind of circles back to what you were saying about satiety. When I eat 2 or 3 large meals per day, I feel satiated for a long period of time. Interestingly enough, before I got on this call with you, I haven't actually eaten anything today. Usually, if I'm going to do an interview or if I have conference calls, I usually don't eat before that because I feel more alert. But when I get off the phone, I'm going to have a large smoothie, which is probably going to have a variety of fruits and some vegetables, some leafy greens. And that's probably going to keep me going until dinner. So today is probably going to be a 2-meal day. So a large brunch and then a large dinner. Now, if I don't have an interview or something else going on in the morning, I might have a large breakfast, a kind of medium-sized lunch, and then a larger dinner. And sometimes I might have dinner earlier so that I can go to bed not feeling too heavy. I don't want to go to sleep at night feeling too heavy, because then I might feel more groggy in the morning. So yeah, I'm definitely a mealer, a large mealer as opposed to a grazer.
Right, me too. I've never been a snacker. It's just I just too busy to do that.
Yeah,
So I
totally.
know that you and Dr. Rick also used to teach where I went to culinary school, the Living Life Culinary Arts Institute. What kind of person might be interested in taking your raw food nutrition class?
I would say anybody who's really interested in adding more fruits and vegetables into their diet to see how, how much further they can take their diet, how much further they can take their health. I would say also people who are interested in being more raw, being close to 100% raw, or even being some percentage cooked. Just, I would say people in general who really want to try to maximize their health over the long term, because we teach people how to be successful over the long term. A lot of people get into raw food and they're into it for a couple of years, and then they find that it's not working for them. And so oftentimes they'll come to us to help them to understand how it can be sustainable over the long term, and to make sure that they're getting all the nutrients that they need, and understand all the different facets of raw food and plant-based nutrition. We cover all the major topics in plant-based nutrition, and our focus of the class, I would say at the base, is whole food plant-based nutrition. That is the most important aspect of our class, having that as a strong base and being able to build a healthy raw food diet on top of that.
Linda wants to know if you ever had weight issues.
You know, I've been the same weight for years, 125, and maybe a couple of times I've lost weight, like when I've gone on a water fast, for example. I actually did a preceptorship when I was in school at Bastyr University at the True North Health Center. So I'm very interested in water fasting for the reversal of certain health challenges. So I've gone on a few water fasts. And so when I've gone on water fasts, I've lost weight, but then I gain it back after a couple months afterwards. So yeah, my weight kind of stays somewhere between 120, 125, maybe on the upper end, 130. It's just been that way for years. And I exercise. I like to run. I like to weight train. So yeah, I haven't really had any, I would say.
Amazing. Do you think that well, I mean, this is I think in every kind of dietary style, but sometimes I feel like well, vegans in general are judgy, but raw food is sometimes they're like a little bit more elite, like that my diet's better than yours. And if you eat any broccoli, then if you steam your broccoli, oh, shame on you. You know what I mean? I don't mean from
Yeah,
you and Rick,
yeah. Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that we like to address. and I'm happy that you asked this. It's not about 100% anything. And this is one of the things that I'm very happy to see in the raw food community, is that we're seeing less of this now. 15 years ago, when I was teaching the science of raw food nutrition in person at Living Light, as you mentioned, there was more of an interest of being 100%. And even back then, I was 95%. And some students would say things to me like, but isn't 100% raw the best? Don't you feel like you're not doing as much for yourself as you could? And I'm like, actually, at that time I was 15 years at that point. And I thought, I figured after 15 years, what works best for me? And I really want you guys to be able to do that for yourself too. There's no judgment. There doesn't need to be judgment. What it comes down to is we want to do what's in our best interest. And there's a lot of people who say that you have to be 100% to be able to experience the best health benefits. And some people really notice that, and it really makes a big difference for them. And I think that's fantastic. And I think it's also fantastic if somebody's 90% or 80 or 70, and that's really doing it for them too. So that's one of the things that we talk about in our class is inclusiveness. And for people who take our class, we have a lot of health coaches, we have healthcare practitioners that take our class too. We also have people who are just interested in their own health who take our class. Some people go on to teach, and they carry that message of inclusion forward.
That's great. Thanks. And I have to thank Maria for another super chat donation. And we have a question from, yeah, it's great. You're doing a great job.
Awesome.
Stacy wants to know exactly what you put in your smoothie.
Okay, awesome. It depends from day to day. It really depends. I like to kind of mix it up. So my husband and I actually went to our wholesale produce distributor last night. We live north of San Francisco, and so we go to Earl's Organic Produce. And what's great about that is you can buy food by the case. And so we have 2 dedicated fridges where we put all this food in. So whenever we go to Earl's, we come home with our so-called produce haul. And when we went yesterday, we got a whole bunch of different melons, because those are in season right now. We got some mangoes, we got some oranges, Valencias are in season right now. We got some bananas. Those are from, elsewhere. We try to go as local as we possibly can, but it's kind of hard to avoid things like bananas, for example. So what I'm going to put in my smoothie probably later on today when we're finished with our conversation here, I'll probably put some bananas in, because I'm planning on going for a run later. So maybe 2 to 3 bananas, and then a variety of other types of fruits. Since we have some mangoes that we got last night that are really nice and ripe, I'm going to put maybe half a mango in, or a whole mango. And then I have some frozen blackberries that I got from a bush down the street. We actually have blackberries growing in our neighborhood at this time of year, and they're really, really nice. They're just, really big, and I have some frozen, so I think I'll put some of those in there too. But on any particular day, I like to have some type of berry. So strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, whatever I can find that's in season. And then maybe some bananas or mangoes, some other type of fruit that mixes well together. There's some types of fruits that don't really mix well. If I want to break a food combining rule, I might actually take some cantaloupe and put some bananas and berries in there, and that digests just fine for me. For some people, they say eat melons away from things. I think with watermelon that works really well, but with cantaloupe, I've actually found that it actually works well with other fruits. So I do have cantaloupe smoothies, and then usually some type of leafy greens. We have some really wonderful arugula that we bought last night, so I'm going to put that in. On other days, I might put other types of leafy greens. I like lacinato kale, also known as dino kale. We bought some of that last night. And then I also like dandelion greens. So those are kind of my favorite greens. I switch those out. Sometimes I put lettuce in, sometimes frisee greens. I have a variety of different greens growing out in our garden that I might put in. I've got some tree collards that I might put in. On other days, I just mix it up, have fun with it. That's a really good question.
Purslane is my favorite.
What's that?
Purslane.
Oh, we've got some wild growing purslane in our garden out there now. I love that too.
Me too.
Good
'Cause
omega-3s.
that's high in omega-3 fatty acid.
Yes. Yep. Alpha linolenic acid. It's delicious. I actually found some growing in our garden a couple of weeks ago, in between our tomatoes and basil. And it's like the most beautiful purslane I've ever seen. It's like this big right now. It's
I love
amazing.
it. Well, you know what's nice about being raw is you never, if there's a power outage, you never have to worry about eating.
No, no. And unfortunately, even though we live in an area where there are power outages, but for some reason, because we're on a circuit where we live in our town, and we actually live in the same town as True North, the True North Health Center up here in Northern California. So we live in an area that's actually really susceptible to fires. So like in the fall, we have to be kind of vigilant to that. And so sometimes we have planned power outages. But what's really interesting is for the last couple of years, we haven't actually lost our power. So we haven't had to worry about that as much. But yes, as a raw foodist, you don't have to worry
Yeah.
about that as much, except for what's in your freezer.
And also for
Or
if
the
you want to
fridge.
use your Vitamix, you got to have electricity for that, I think.
That's right. But you can always go the old fashioned route, which I do on most days, actually. I just, eat without blending. Blending is really fun. When I first became interested in raw, I didn't blend anything.
Yeah.
I actually finally got a Krups blender after a couple of years of being raw so I could make dressings. And that was like a game changer.
Yeah.
And then moving to a Vitamix. We didn't actually move to a Vitamix until like 15 years into my raw food journey.
That's incredible.
So yeah, you don't have to use those
Absolutely.
appliances.
Did you ever read a book by Wrangham called Catching Fire? And I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I have read that book. I have read that book. It's so interesting. I actually, one of the studies that he cites in that book is the Geeson study that we just talked about. And I was kind of surprised that he didn't look a little bit closer at what contemporary raw foodists actually eat, at least here in the United States. So he was basing a lot of what he was talking about insofar as raw foodists on a few different studies that weren't really all that, in my opinion, could have been better designed, that could have actually looked at contemporary raw foodists a little bit more closely. And he could actually see how we're thriving and actually look at the people who are thriving and what it is that they're doing. So it was an interesting book, but what I thought was really interesting about it was in the last couple of pages, he talked about how cooking has gotten us to a certain point in our existence on this planet and how it has led to society and things like that. I think that's really a fascinating and very thoughtful way of looking at things. But one of the last things that he said is our challenge now is how to make cooked food healthier.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to answer this, Dr. Dina, but Linda wants to know how old you are. When I look at you, I say 35, maybe 40.
I am 52.
Oh my God, no way. You remind me of the actress Amy Adams. Has anyone ever told you that?
Yes, it's funny. You should say that. A lot of people say that I look like Amy Adams when my hair is blonder, like it is in the summer. Although I haven't been out as much this summer, when it's more blonde, people sometimes say that I look like Nicole Kidman, like when I have my hair back. So I get that, and I get Amy Adams a lot.
Her too. You do look like her too. Well, we have time for one more question. Ken's been contributing such amazing questions today. And is what about food combining? Because some people poo-poo it and other people think, no, you have to follow the strict rules.
I have to say, when I first became interested in raw food, and actually, Ken, thank you for asking this question. This is a really good question. Like all the questions we've had today. When it comes to food combining, when I first became interested in raw food, I followed it to a T. And it really made a difference for me at the time, or at least transitioning from a cooked food oriented diet over to raw food. I wanted to do everything really well. I really wanted to give an opportunity to have raw food really work for me. So I really followed it very closely, made a big difference in my digestion. Oh my gosh, I used to eat fruit on top of cooked food, and I would get digestive challenges with that. So one of the things that was a block when I first became interested in raw was I'm not going to be able to eat fruit because I can't digest it. But then food combining was a revelation, eating fruit away from other foods. It made a huge difference. I have relaxed that over the years, and I keep the principles that work very well for me. So what I found is that eating fruit first, earlier in the day with maybe some leafy greens if I'm going to make a smoothie, and then eating my salad meal or my heavier, if I'm going to eat anything cooked, I'll have that later in the day. I never eat fruit on top of salad or cooked food because then I start to feel, a little bit of bloating. So I don't do that. So I would say that the fruit aspect of the food combining really has made a huge difference for me. Another part of that, of the food combining point of view is if I'm going to eat something cooked, I will have a salad before that, and then I'll have the cooked food afterwards. So that has worked as well. All the other aspects of food combining, I can either take them or leave them, honestly. I would say when it comes to food combining, check it out, see how it works for you, and, take what works.
I think everybody needs to do what's good for them, but they need to eat more fruits and vegetables by any means necessary.
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. And what it comes down to is a diet that's based on fruits and vegetables is going to help most people. It's going to make a big difference for people. And that is something that I think that most people who eat a plant-based diet can certainly agree upon. Having
Absolutely.
more fruits and
I've never known
vegetables.
anybody that adopted one that didn't feel better and look better. And people are saying your hair is beautiful, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yep.
Absolutely. Well, I've been posting the link to the Raw Food Mastery Summit completely free. It's a replay, so I hope you guys will sign up. There's some wonderful interviews. There's one with me, but I especially like the one with Dr. Milton Mills. And I think Dr. Greger did one too that was quite nice.
Yeah, we have one with Dr. Greger. We have one with Dr. Barnard. He talked about his new book on there. Dr. Mills, you were on there. Dr. Nathan Gershfeld, we had him this year, and that was really fun. So a few other plant-based doctors, Dr. Gabriel Cousins. Oh, and we also have Dr. Cyrus Kambata and Robbie from Mastering Diabetes, Robbie Barbero. Fantastic interviews with those guys. And then a variety of other people from the raw food community, very well-known raw food teachers. And we talk about a variety of different raw food related topics. We talk about sustainability. We talk about the importance of leafy greens and a variety of other really fascinating topics. So I would say if you want to learn more from some very inspiring raw food teachers and plant-based doctors and Chef AJ and some other really fantastic speakers, I'd say go over there and check it out. Another thing that I'd like to mention is that this the replay is going to be available starting probably tomorrow or Wednesday. So.
And what's nice is yours is an audio summit only. So for those of you that don't like to use data, you don't have to use any video. You can be listening to it while you're doing something else and even using your phone at the same time. So it was very easy to listen to, and both you and Dr. Rick are excellent interviewers.
Oh, well, thank you very much. We love talking to people about our favorite topic, just kind of like today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Karin Dina. It was a pleasure talking to you today. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. I sure hope you'll come back tomorrow at 11 o'clock when we are broadcasting live again from Mexico, when Lori Neighbor will be making Mexican chilaquiles with salsa roja. Thanks so much. Thanks again, Dr. Karin.
Thank you very much, Chef AJ. This was fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.